All right, so in this video, we're going to be dealing with population ecology, Unit 8 of AP Biology 8.3. So what is a population? Population is comprised of individuals of the same species that live in a particular area. So it's not all the polar bears on the planet, it is that particular group of polar bears, and that is a large gathering of polar bears. Individuals in a population interact with one another. They interact with their environment together. They typically are interbreeding. So that you don't see populations breeding with one another very often, but they can do that. Instead, they kind of stay within, and there's not, there's just because of geographic isolation or other different kind of factors that can go on there. And population size is typically directly relational to the amount of food that is available. The size of a population obviously depends on the availability of resources. Um, that's kind of what this shows with human population size. As our ability to produce food became better, population size increased with that. Um, and what this is showing you, this idea of innovation, is if we increase our ability to make food, we will, by definition, increase the population. If our ability to produce food doesn't get better, then our population will stagnate because we just can't feed everybody. So it's the same thing that applies to polar bears or whales or whatever you're talking about. If there's less food, the population is going to decrease. Less food availability supports less individuals, reproduction rates decrease, offspring survivability decreases. Um, but if food is more available, there's more reproduction, there's more of everything, right? And so that makes sense. And so in order to cope with this, organisms have adapted in different ways in order to um, in order to have the most energy at the right time, so to speak. We talked about this a little bit with plants reproducing in particular seasons, losing their leaves when the day length changes, growing leaves and reproducing in the spring when there's the most sun. Some species migrate in order to follow the food around. Our own uh, species used to do that as well. Some species will hibernate during the cold months in order to conserve energy and only come out when the food availability is high. So, a little bit about how populations grow. The study of population growth is typically called population dynamics, and population dynamics are based on several factors. I have a couple of them here, but primarily this is just going to be birth and death as a very simple thing. If more individuals are being born than are dying, that population is growing. The opposite is true, that population is shrinking. There are other factors that can go into this: age of a population, number of offspring produced, number of females in a population, frequency of reproduction. There's a whole lot of different factors that can go into this. Um, but there's a equation that we can use to represent this, and very simple equation. Again, this is the equation literally copied and pasted right off the equation sheet for our class. And so population growth, which is change in population over change in time, is equal to the birth rate minus the death rate. Very simple. If there are two individuals being born a year and one individual dying, then that population is growing by one individual a year. That's a silly illustration, but you get the idea. And that would represent the change in a population over the change in time. So very simple equation there, but you can make it harder, and that's what we're going to try to do. And so this idea of exponential growth, if a population doesn't have any constraints, so if a population doesn't have any limitation of resources, if all of those limitations have been taken away, then that population will grow as much as it can. This is called exponential growth. Um, Basically, a population is producing more individuals. More individuals are reproducing more than less individuals, and it just kind of has this doubling effect. If there's no if there's no limitations on resources, if there's no pressures from the outside, then that population will grow as fast as it can. Sometimes you'll see this called a J-shaped curve because of the shape of this curve. And this again is called exponential growth. This can be represented mathematically as well. So here is the equation for exponential growth, change in population over change in time is equal to R max times population size. R max is basically maximum per capita growth rate. And so what does that mean? This is the maximum amount of a population to grow, or the population's max ability to grow. This will typically be a given in an equation, and so you will just have to basically plug and play on equations like this. It'll typically be in the context of a word problem where you have to read and find um, these things. You may be given two population sizes, for instance, an initial and a final, to give you the change, or two times to give you the change, and you have to do some subtraction there in order to get these. But in general, this is going to be a very simple equation. You may be asked to solve for Rmax. And so there's several things that you can do, but this is going to be something that you should be able to do with just a few clicks of your calculator.